All right, Jeff, you want to go to the next slide? All right, so our webinar today is an overview of the changes of the MAS solicitation with Refresh 29 coming in of this month. So on the agenda today, I'm going to read a quick disclaimer. We're going to go over the purpose of the planned action. We're going to go over the solicitation changes for all large categories, and then changes for specific large categories, subcategories, or sins, and then a change to the economic price adjustment clause. And you can go to the disclaimer. So I'm just going to read this brief disclaimer. So the purpose of this webinar is to allow GSA FAS to verbally present the draft plan solicitation refresh and related MAS modification as a courtesy to industry. All comments on the information presented should be submitted via the Q&A function on this call. GSA FAS will consider all relevant comments and document them, but we are not obliged to respond to any questions at this time. GSA FAS may address some comments during the call or provide responses to relevant questions on the original Interact posting. GSA FAS does not guarantee a response to all questions, but may issue a formal response to industry comments or related inquiries. GSA FAS will make changes to the draft as appropriate. Interested parties should review the final version of solicitation refresh or MAS modification closely for additional changes made to this draft. And as I stated previously, we ask that you please submit all questions via the Q&A function on this webinar. For additional questions after the webinar, please submit them to the original Interact posting. Like I said, GSA will address questions as appropriate. And we plan to, as we're recording the session, we'll send this out with the slide deck and a written Q&A document via Interact. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Jeff. You can skip one more slide there, Jeff. There you go.
Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. As Matt said, so we're planning to issue the next refresh to the MAS solicitation right now scheduled for August 28th, 2025. And the first thing we're going to go over is changes that apply across the board to all large categories. Okay, bullet one. So for I guess section A there all of that speaks to the FCP or continued FCP transition. So with this refresh, the PPT for products for new offers, new templates for new offers. So for new offers only, PPTs for products is being replaced by the FCP product file, and you'll see that on the gsa.gov page. The PPT for services and training is being replaced by the FCP Services Plus file. And two of our specialty sins, but the single PPT that covers two of those specialty sins, the PPT for 541930 and 611630 is being replaced also by the FCP Services Plus file. Exceptions to that. So we're going to continue to have sin-specific PPTs for that list of sins there. The one highlight we want to show, so for 4PL, the sin-specific PPT for 4PL is new with this refresh, so highlighting that. And again, this change applies for new offers. For modifications, you're just going to follow your original award file type. So if your contract was awarded, if you're in FCP or your contract was awarded based on the FCP product file and or the FCP Services Plus file, you would continue to use that for modification, or you would use that for modifications. If it was your contract was awarded based on a legacy PPT or a sin-specific PPT, you would use those PPTs for your modifications. Okay, section B speaks to electronic commerce requirements. So we're adding a note to GSAR clause 552.238-103. And the intent of that note is to make it clear that contractors must comply with catalog submission and maintenance rules as outlined on the FCP help page. So this note, and the note is right here, this is word for word with the note that's going to be added to the clause, speaks to the, says all contractors are required to comply with GSA's established catalog submission and maintenance rules to ensure accurate and complete electronic commerce representation. Detailed instructions and guidance can be found in the FCP help page, and there's a link to that. So Again, just pointing in the solicitation directly to the FCP catalog instructions. Okay, and Joe McGuire from OPC is going to do a deep dive into the EPA changes, but in summary, we're adding new GSAR clause 552.238-120, replacing legacy EPA clauses 552.21670 and IFSS 969. So the idea is we're providing a streamlined and standardized price adjustment process. It's providing greater flexibility for both our contractors and our COs. And Joe will go into this a little more, but there's no change to existing contracts unless a triggering event occurs. Either the contract requires an EPA or an add items mod. Sorry, let me move my bar out of the way so I can read. Exercise of an upcoming option, submission of a modification to propose a new EPA method or mechanism. So those are the triggering events. And there are going to be some updates to the SCP in conjunction with that to implement those changes. Okay, so we're also completing the SBSA SIN transition. So refresh 29 will be the final step in completing that transition. As we talked about before, the idea here was to reduce administrative burdens and compliance risk. And we've talked about this before, but the SBSA structure previously required contractors to manage multiple contracts, limiting flexibility, increasing complexity. Especially for small businesses, obviously. So order level set-asides will remain available to support small business. And specifically for refresh 29, after refresh 29 is issued, all 19 of the retired SBSA SINs will be completely removed from the solicitation and associated documents. Specifically in this refresh, there are currently 14 remaining SBSA SINs. They will be removed with this refresh. And then this refresh also includes clause and provision updates outlined in GSAR change 187, which we are highlighting in this webinar. Okay. So these are our changes that apply to specific large categories, subcategories, or SINs. Under Office Management, Office Services subcategory for SIN 561320, we are adding 7 SIN subgroups. These are the subgroups that were previously under the SBSA version of the temporary staffing SIN. We're just replicating them over to the non-set-aside SIN. Sort of a leftover piece of right-sizing MAS changes we implemented a couple of refreshes ago. This miscellaneous under furniture and furnishings, the miscellaneous furniture subcategory, SIN 33712, previously had a language in the SIN description that spoke to children's toys, dolls, and games that are specifically excluded from scope. So we're revising that SIN to make it clear that children's toys, dolls, and games are not within scope of MAS. Okay, in the IT category, under the cloud services subcategory, the cloud computing and cloud-related IT professional services SIN, we are revising SIN instructions to align with how software as a service is commercially ordered. The on-demand self-service requirement from the NIST cloud definition will not apply to SaaS offerings under this SIN. And right here, word for word, is the language that will be added to SIN 518210C to make that clear. And there's a note there that all other NIST cloud characteristics will still apply. Okay, and also under the IT category, the IT services subcategory, revisions to 54151 hacks. GSA is updating the category attachment for this SIN to reflect recent changes by the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education Framework, NICE framework. The requirement to reference specific work role IDs will be replaced with a broader recommendation that vendors align labor categories generally with the NICE framework. NICE, I don't know which way to say it, but you get the idea. So this change is necessary because the framework no longer includes work role IDs making it difficult for vendors to reference them as previously required. Okay, two changes, fairly minor changes in the miscellaneous category. These are two subcategories that no longer have sins. So this is kind of a housekeeping administrative change. So the award subcategory and the personal hair care items subcategory are going to be deleted. Again, there are no sins under these subcategories, so kind of an admin change there. A couple of changes relevant to drones. So we are removing the subgroup. So this is under scientific management and solutions category, laboratory equipment subcategory. The revisions are to SIN 334515, and we're removing that subgroup unmanned aerial vehicle systems, drones for operations, support, data collection, analysis, reporting, and related services. That subgroup will be removed. Also related to drones, under the security and protection category, protective equipment subcategory, SIN is 334220. We are explicitly including unmanned aircraft systems and drones to this SIN. So you can see here specifically, this is the language that will be added to the SIN description for SIN 334220 to make it clear that unmanned aircraft systems, drones, along with associated replacement parts, accessories, and ancillary services are included under the SIN. And one more note or an update to the security and protection category, protective equipment subcategory. This is SIN 336413. We're adding a note to this SIN. Basically, we do not have specific technical specifications under this SIN that would apply to aircraft or aircraft-related equipment. So this note makes it clear that is obviously the responsibility of the ordering activity, because we do not have any MAS contract or solicitation level terms that are applicable there. Okay, with that, I will pass it over to Joe McGuire to talk about the new EPA clause.
Thanks, Jeff. My name is Joe McGuire. I am with the FAS Office of Policy and Compliance. And as Jeff said, we're going to talk about the new EPA clause. So we, GSA, published a case that went final in the Federal Register on September 4th of 2024. So this is quite a while coming, but I think we finally got most of the wrinkles worked out, we think. Anyway, what this case did is it added the GSAM provision guidance there at 538.270-4, as well as the new EPA clause itself, 552.238.120. And this eliminates all of the legacy EPA clauses. One to rule them all. And you'll notice when you dig into this new clause that it doesn't include any time-based limitations or ceiling limits. This was intentional to provide flexibility and really to be able to negotiate terms and conditions, methods and mechanisms that are appropriate to each contractor's situation. And also important to remember that this really is just mirroring or an extension of the acquisition letter MB 2202 that gave us those flexibilities from the legacy clauses during COVID, essentially. Right. When we look at implementation, as Jeff said, this is going to happen pretty quickly. We anticipate issuing a new refresh at the end of the month, and this again will incorporate the new prescription clause and revised SCP language. So two important terms that we need to understand going forward with the new clause are method and mechanism. And method refers to the agreed upon procedures. So think timing and frequency. Do you want your prices escalated twice a year on January 3rd and June 3rd? The method also includes the mechanism, and there are four available mechanisms. You've got prices or escalations based on fixed escalation, adjustments based on market index, adjustments based on established pricing, think commercial price list. And it's important to note here that, consistent with the current solicitation, that these established pricing mechanisms, they must be dated, currently existing, standalone, and not prepared solely for the government. Additionally, the last one, which we hope we never have to use, adjustments based on unforeseeable significant changes. So, barring a COVID or hyperinflation or, perhaps, the price of copper triples overnight, those kinds of things. So for new offers that are folks who have not submitted an offer, or offers that are in-house, you'll have to be sure that you accept the new or accept the refresh before contract award. This will incorporate the new clause. Then you will more than likely have to negotiate, or maybe even renegotiate if you haven't quite gotten to contract award, the terms and conditions, again, that method and mechanism, into the final contract. For existing contracts, again, as most of you are probably used to, it's going to be a MAS mod. You're going to accept it, and that will incorporate, again, the new EPA clause. And so that's, I think, one of the most important things here for those of you who do have contracts is that by accepting the MAS mod, it will incorporate that clause, but it won't affect your current method or mechanism. So if you have a fixed rate of escalation incorporated, let's say you're going to escalate your prices at 3% on September 3rd, because that's the anniversary date of your contract. That's still going to happen. And the reason for at least a fixed rate that's going to happen that way is because it already conforms to the new clause. You have the method of an annual escalation and the mechanism of a fixed rate. And another important note here is that fixed rates can only be escalated once per year on the anniversary date of the contract. So, maybe you're thinking, ooh, we could do a fixed rate, but do it twice a year because of X, Y, and Z. And while, we would generally support that idea, unfortunately, because of system constraints right now, they can only be escalated once a year on the anniversary date of the contract. If you want your prices escalated more frequently than that, I would recommend incorporating an index and then negotiating those, specific terms and conditions, method and mechanism into your contract with your CO. When you are using an index or a commercial price list, you're going to need to submit a terms and conditions modification prior to escalating your prices, or if you're adding products or services, because we want to be sure that we're documenting the contract files adequately to show, hey, we incorporated the new terms and conditions, this is what it is, and now we're escalating our pricing. All right, so if you, again, have not yet submitted an offer, what we'll do specific to EPA, I mean, there are other requirements under the pricing section of the solicitation, but again, specifically to EPA, propose specific methods to apply. Again, think timing and frequency. Submit one or more mechanisms. Maybe it's appropriate to have more than one. If you've got, say, products and services on your contract, or you're proposing products and services, maybe you want a fixed rate for your services and you want to use an index for your products. So that can be possible to have multiple. And if you are using a fixed rate, as far as proposing prices go, you'll give us 20 years worth of pricing. And then if you're using an index or a established pricing, then you'll only give us one price. All right, so for current contract holders, when you either submit a modification for an adjustment, or if you're just being proactive and want to submit a terms and conditions mod to get it in there, again, identify your specific methods, identify specific mechanisms, and the terms and conditions mod can be initiated. It will incorporate everything, and then EPA mods will then, after that, they will affect your pricing. All right. So last slide, a couple of good things on here. So first, the more information can be found in the modification guide for folks post-award. That is being updated now and will be available when the refresh comes out. Really, I think an attractive part of this change is that if you have a fixed rate of escalation, we're going to make that determination that the pricing is fair and reasonable at the time of contract award. And so for that 5-year chunk, I mean, you don't have to submit a mod, right? You kind of set it and forget it. And the price, it just keeps going up. At the time of option, the CO will, evaluate your pricing, evaluate the EPA, evaluate the fixed rate. They may negotiate, they may not, and things will just, keep going forward. Particularly attractive for index users is that once the method and mechanism have been found fair and reasonable, whether it's excuse me, pre-award or after a terms and conditions mod has been done, whenever you come in for an EPA using an index, CO does not have to make a fair and reasonable price determination, because we're using that objective index, that change. So as long as your request conforms with the method and mechanism in the contract, you'll submit your documents, CO will look at it, they'll write it up and send you on your way. So this really, I think, gives us a lot of it gives us a lot more efficiency in this type of process. But if you're using established pricing, or hopefully we never use the unforeseeable significant changes, but when those mods are affected, fair and reasonable has to be done each time. And that's all I've got.
Thanks, Joe. Matt, am I turning it over to you to close out?
Yep.
I think we're good. We've got Q&A. We've got the Q&A recorded. As you said before, we'll provide them written responses.
Yeah, so we have to go through a process to make sure the video is good for accessibility, and we will go through and answer the Q&A, and then we will make the slide deck available, I would say, within 1 to 2 weeks via Interact. Other than that, that's pretty much it today, and we appreciate you guys coming out, joining in with the webinar. And in the beginning of this, we said if there's any additional questions, you can leave them on the original Interact notice, and we'll get to them as well. Thank you.